One of the most important aspects of communication is the one that we have with ourselves. It is interesting, this communication with oneself. It is interesting because prolonged silence for animals, and we have to admit we are still, to a smaller or larger extent, quite the animals, is perceived as a sign of danger. Silence triggers a feeling of uneasiness and fear. Have you heard the silence on the arrival of a predator in a jungle? How the grazing deer stops short and alert and ready to scoot. In Indian communication design, speaking to oneself has been studied very meticulously. We are going to explore the Yoga Shastra of Patanjali as an exercise of speaking to oneself, as an exercise of exploring oneself, and more importantly, an exercise in being oneself. Why do we do that? Because we have to engage with ourselves, our bodies, our minds, our intellect, our spirit, as much as and at times more so than the world that is outside our being. We seek to communicate so that we can be silent, fearless, and free. Atha Yoganushasanam. This is the first verse in the Yoga Shastra of Patanjali. Atha means now. It is indicative of a beginning, but more than that, Atha is symbolic of an auspicious movement. We, you and me, are in an auspicious movement, sharing, contemplating, engaging with some very profound and interesting ideas. We sit together in this moment, come together this moment and say, Atha, now. We begin a journey. Thus, Atha is an invocation of all that we hold sacred, privileged, special in our hearts. Therefore, we begin with Atha Yoganushasanam. The next term to understand is the prefix Anu to Shasanam. Anu is a reference to the historic nature of the present contemplation. It indicates that what is being discussed, critiqued, contemplated has a history of such inquiry. This inquiry is a tradition dating as far back as human history. Thus, we have two terms, Atha and Anu. One signifying the auspiciousness of this fortunate moment when we begin our contemplation, and the other signifying a long tradition of such inquiry. When one begins such an inquiry, one follows a tradition of stating the Anubandha Chatushtaya. According to this tradition, we first try to identify who this inquiry is for. Such a person or persons is called the Adhikari. The Yoga Shastra is for a person who is suffering from the effects of the Tapatraya, the three Tapa. Tapa is literally fever. One suffers so much that one is ill. What are these three Tapa that one suffers from? These are Adhibhautik, Adhidaivik, and Adhyatmik. Let us look at these briefly. Bhautik is of this world, our world as we experience it, our reality. It is interesting, this reality. It is dynamic. It changes us and we change it. A constant engagement as we breathe and live. It makes us happy, sad, contented, uncomfortable, stressed, and through these ups and downs, we feel the pressure of living our lives. Life is about our engagements with our realities, and we know that it can leave us with a terrible, feverish feeling. It is interesting how we suffer from love as much as hatred, from sorrow as much as happiness, from winning as much as losing. Daivik is about those we look up to, beginning from parents, family, teachers, and then as we live, we constantly look up to others, or others look up to us. Either way, one is constantly measuring up to someone, living up to expectations of a host of people who we consider important in our lives. For some, great human beings, good human beings, big human beings suffice. For others, prophets, gods, deities are required to look up to admire, to measure up to. One learns as one lives that some gods fall by the wayside, some disappoint. Some no longer remain gods but become friends, colleagues, even husbands and wives, and even enemies. We are constantly in search of an ideal, and admittedly, it is a feverish activity. Gives much tap at times, doesn't it? Atmic is to do with our spirit, our soul, the we in us, or the I in me. When the teacher in primary school introduced us to the alphabet, we had no ability to inquire into what the teacher knew or whether the teacher was right at all. But we figured things out for ourselves. To begin with, all inquiry is a leap of faith, and at the end of it all, isn't all living a leap of faith? A question of believing in one and not the other. It is a challenge for a human being to first understand these three tapa, adhibhautik, adhidaivik and adhyatmik. Then the next challenge is to resolve them in such a way that one can experience freedom from them. This is the point from which the contemplation of the Yoga Shastra begins. The more acute the awareness, the better suited one is to study and practice yoga. And the less acutely aware one is, the less prepared one is for the study and the practice of yoga. The next step in the Anubandha Chatushtaya is the prayojana, or the purpose, the intent of the study. Imagine freedom. It is difficult unless one has the answer to the question, freedom from what? Now imagine bondage. Again, one has to first answer, bondage to or by what? Seeking freedom from the three tapa mentioned above is an active process. Our necessities and our indulgences pull us and push us, and we constantly seek freedom from one, then the other. The purpose of contemplating on yoga and engaging with its instructions and directions, with its disciplines, is to attain a level of kaivalya, or aloneness within oneself, that would help us face the three tapa first with equanimity and then with positive, active detachment. The third step in the Anubandha Chatushtaya is the Vishaya, or the subject matter of this inquiry. What is yoga? That is the question one begins to ask and attempt to answer through this engagement, through this contemplation, through this interrogation. And finally, what is the relationship of those who engage with yoga and the Yoga Shastra? It is one of knower and knowledge. This discipline can be acquired, it can be lived. There is nothing mysterious about it. It is all practically applicable, immensely doable. This knowledge can be shared, it can be engaged with, contemplated upon and practiced. Thus, we now begin our inquiry, engagement, contemplation of the discipline of yoga, following in the steps of earlier traditions of similar critical inquiries. Let us listen to some music now. It's a bhajan by Kabir. Enjoy yourselves.
अजहु मिले कैसे दर्शन तोरा अजहु मिले कैसे दर्शन तोरा बिन दर्शन मन माने क्यों मोरा अजहु मिले कैसे दर्शन तोरा अजहु मिले कैसे दर्शन तोरा ही कुसेवग कि तुम ही अयाना हम ही कुसेवग कि तुम ही अयाना दुह में दोष का भगवाना तुम कहिए तु त्रिभुवन पति राजा तुम कहिए तु त्रिभुवन पति राजा मन वंचित सब पुरवन काजा कहे कबीर हरि कर से दिखारा हम ही बुलावो कि तुम चली आओ
Hello and welcome back. So, what is yoga? Yoga chitta vritti nirodha. That is yoga. Yoga is the ability to control, regulate, channelize, integrate, synergize, quiet the chitta or the mind. But what stimulates, activates the mind? These are the vrittis. What are these vrittis? Now, before we get overwhelmed by the terminology, let us listen to a beautiful stotra by Adi Shankaracharya. It is called the Mano Shatakam or the Nirvana Shatakam. It is important to sing and understand this stotra to move forward in this conversation. The stotra follows the line of thought where one says, I am not this, I am not that, and then asserts what one is. So, who are we? We are Chidananda Swarupa. We are pure consciousness and happiness. Yoga is the ability that brings us to our true state, Chitta and Ananda Swarupa. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham na cha shrotra jivhe na cha ghrana netre न च व्योम भूमिर्न तेजो न वायुः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न च प्राणसंज्ञो न वै मञ्च वायुर्न वा सप्तधातुर्न वा पञ्चकोशः न वाक्पाणिपादौ न चोपस्थपायु चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न मे द्वेषरागौ न मे लोभमोहौ मदो नैव मे नैव मात्सर्यभावः न धर्मो न चार्थो न कामो न मोक्षः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न पुण्यं न पापं न सौख्यं न दुःखं न मन्त्रो न तीर्थं न वेदा न यज्ञः अहं भोजनं नैव भोज्यं न भोक्ता चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् न मे मृत्युशङ्का न मे जातिभेदः पिता नैव मे नैव माता न जन्म न बन्धुर्न मित्रं गुरुर्नैव शिष्यः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम् अहं निर्विकल्पो निराकाररूपो विभुर्व्याप्य सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणि सदा मे समत्वन्न मुक्तिर्न बन्धः चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहं चिदानन्दरूप शिवोऽहं शिवोऽहम्. So now we know what these vrittis are. They are what are being negated in the Manoshatkam. When these vrittis engage with the chitta, our mind, our consciousness, the chitta begins to perform 5 roles. What are these roles? Let us look at each of these carefully. The first is the Mudha Chitta. The mind engages with everything outside the body, outside itself. It attaches, engages, disengages again and again to everything that is located outside. Such a mind is lazy, preoccupied, sleepy, and generally unconscious of itself. So engrossed is it in consuming all that is around it. A characteristic of this state of mind is that it is unmindful of others. It does not much care about others. It is in a state of constant consumption and detachment to one and then the other. Next is the Kshipta Chitta. The senses are constantly throwing the mind to things and objects outside the body. We are absorbed in the traffic of reality passing by us, and like little children, we remain in awe at every passing thing. We want to touch, feel, smell, taste, see all the time. Such a state is the Kshipta Chitta. Vikshipta Chitta is eccentric. It has arrived at a conclusion that as we consume things, we reach a level of satiation where we do not want more of it. Such a chitta suddenly finds itself detached from something it was very attached to. It becomes aware of this detachment. It becomes aware of the process of detachment, the experience of freedom that such detachment gives. There is also a feeling of power. One often has this feeling of helplessness about some things around us. They draw us to them and we go to them as if pulled by an unconscious force. Then we reach a point of the Vikshipta Chitta and suddenly that object no longer exercises the same hold over us. It is an experience of freedom that of a moment gives us immense joy. Next comes the Ekagra Chitta. This is the state where we are now with ourselves. The one important characteristic of this state of being is concentration, intense concentration. We choose to be what we want to be. It is a state of completion within ourselves. We no longer judge ourselves by a measure that is outside of us. We have our own very well defined values, our own ethic, our own principles. It is like we are our own God. Feel proud, isn't it? All powerful. That is exactly why this is the penultimate state, not the final goal. The final goal is Niruddha Chitta. This is the state where one does not cry out for want of freedom of speech and expression. One is free. It is a state of being. One is conscious of this state. It is an active state. It is this state that yoga tries to achieve. Yoga leads to Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Why does Chitta have these 5 states? Because the vrittis affect us differently. Because we are in different states of relationship with the Tapatraya, the Adhibhautik, the Adhidaivik and the Adhyatmik. So what happens when the Chitta is able to control and channelize the effects of the vrittis? Tada drashtu swarupavasthanam. Once we realize our own Chitta, our conversation with ourself ends in a conversation of silence with oneself. We begin to see ourselves as we are, who we are. We settle down comfortably with ourselves, as one does with an old friend. We have no more need to explain, engage, interrogate, contemplate, think. We simply know who and what we are, and we are comfortable with that. Thank you for listening in. Let us end this contemplation with a song. This is an Abhanga by Tukaram.
विठ्ठल 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 जोडूनिया कर उभा राहिलो समोर जोडूनिया कर उभा राहिलो समोर हेची माझे भांडवल हेची माझे भांडवल जाणे कारण विठ्ठल 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 भाकितो करुणा आता नुपेक्षा वेदीना भाकितो करुणा आता नुपेक्षा वेदीना तुका म्हणे डोई ठेवी वेळोवेळा पायी तुका म्हणे डोई ठेवी वेळोवेळा